Fireside chat. So for those of you, this is who don't know 1KX, don't know Christopher. It's let me give a little bit of introduction. I first met Christopher and his partner Lasse in Hong Kong, I think in 2018. And Christopher is the founder of a fund called 1KX. 1KX is one of the first and largest crypto-focused funds. I think they launched in 2017, and they launched from and started with about 6.5 million, and grew that to about $1.2 billion. And I think it's an open-ended fund, so I think they manage in that sort of that range of capital now, primarily an open-ended fund, but also have raised a standalone venture fund as well pretty recently, if I remember correctly. And so, I'm excited to have known them for that long a period of time. They also are seed investors in Fluence. So then they did that even before I was involved. So I won't take that personally, but it didn't have to do with me. But we'll find out what drove that investment a little bit later. And I think they're invested in over 70 crypto and blockchain projects. So deep exposure across the industry. So thrilled to have Christopher here. I guess let's first start, and if you could talk about kind of founding 1KX in 2017, what that was like, what you were thinking about, what you saw, and kind of how that's evolved.
Yeah, thanks. So, before we went into crypto, we were entrepreneurs ourselves. We were based in Berlin, and we were building startups in the mobile space. But eventually we got pretty frustrated with that. There was a lot of platform risk that we were exposed to. Every time, you were submitting an update to the App Store, you were praying to the App Store gods, that it would go through, and that they wouldn't reject it, and you would have to start from scratch again. And so, we kind of got frustrated with mobile as a platform. And we were also thinking, okay, platforms come in cycles, roughly of 10 to 20 years, and we were thinking, okay, after mobile, what is going to be the next platform? And coincidentally, so this was early 2017, Ethereum was going through its first hype cycle around this time. And so, we've looked into Ethereum as a platform ourselves. And it really had everything that we wanted from a platform, right? It's open source, permissionless, censorship resistant. And those were kind of the three key ingredients, right? We were missing from the app stores and mobile as a platform. And so we were, really, deeply considering actually building on top of Ethereum. However, it was.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, it's sort of obvious, but just 1KX, derivation of that name?
For us, it was always in the startup world, right? You have this notion of, okay, you only fund it if it is a 10x or if it is a 0 to 1. And you thought okay, with crypto and blockchain, trustlessness, and all of these incentives, we can actually enable 1,000 times better applications. That is where went into where resource provisioning networks.
Right, crowd rate and is generating real revenue, which means you actually kind of get into.
Well, I think DePIN actually for the longest time was very counterintuitive to a lot of investors. I remember when we were working very closely early on with Evgeny from Fluence, but also with Sam from Arweave. We were going to all the investors out there, every single one, and we were pitching them Arweave, we were pitching them Fluence, and yeah, they said no, most of them, all right? And then eventually, things start picking up, and they all start to understand it, and they come around. And so I think contrarian takes kind of is a helpful a lot of investments in DePIN.
And are there sectors that if you were a builder you'd be focused on? Are there on it today? And not even that was only a subset of it. So I don't know what's coming next. Seems like telco is pretty well covered from the panelists and the people we've heard today, but there could be plenty more things out there. Any lessons you've learned from investments, anything in particular that you've regret or wish you'd done more of? Kind of could be either way.
I don't know. The moment you
billion is in as well, right?
That's how your brain works. You only remember the bad things.
Yeah. Fair enough. And so, any other lessons from companies, from founders, from people to advices for founders and companies? Like mistakes you see founders make?
It's like pretty general. I think, like for founders, I think it's very important, they shouldn't be afraid to go out of their comfort zone. We've kind of like seen like, the best founders, they've just been kind of like reinventing themselves, like if it wasn't, so don't be afraid of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can think of that markets evolve and blockchain crypto market 20 coins and they're different significantly over time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I get you mentioned, for a long period of time. I mean, I would imagine that's a big selling projects as you look to fund them versus other investors that may be more shorter term focused. Do you see that coming up?
I mean, not so much. I think. Certainly, yes. Some founders like tell us about funds, when that have like that are like pushing them for like shorter lockup periods or something like that. But it doesn't really come up that often. I think like everybody understands, at least like in a professional VC space, right? That this is not like a quick flipping game, right? That you really need to have like that you need to be able to sit these investments out over multiple years. And yeah, I think like at least on the VC perspective, like the space has matured quite a bit.
What about on the liquid side? Because on the liquid side, do you buy just on the market? Do you buy locked tokens from a foundation? That's where I would think the holding duration would be kind of more relevant.
Yeah, I mean, we sometimes do these things, a lot more opportunistic, but we still do them, through like a venture lens. We do them because we have conviction, like in a certain, vision for this project, and then we also kind of like want to see that vision play out, and we're not going to sell before that.
Fair enough. I mentioned earlier that you guys were early investors in Fluence. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw in Fluence that made you interested? Obviously way pre-DePIN narrative. Talk a little through that investment.
Yeah, I mean, back then, we've met Evgeny and Dimitri, like super two nerdy guys. And back then, like the space, back then, there were a lot more, I would say, I don't know, like very opportunistic folks in the space, like really promising, like castles in the sky to like everybody. And so what we kind of like needed to do back then is, like we needed to kind of like filter out, like, okay, who is like real about what they want to do and who's not real about what they want to do. And then with Evgeny and Dimitri, right, we definitely like, had the impression that they were like very serious about what they wanted to do. They had like the right technological background. They had like a great network from where they came from.
DAO, and is now one of the governing members of the DAO, which is a big vote of confidence in Fluence, and for us, an important step in decentralization to have kind of non-founders, non-employees as part of that governance. So I'm very excited to have Christopher as part of that.
Happy to help.
No, which is terrific. You may regret saying that when some of these on-chain votes come up and we've got to do some quick turnarounds, but it should be great. I guess some people here, there are other fund managers here. Any advice to people who are thinking of launching a fund or who do their own investing? You and Lasse have been partnered for a long time. How do you divide responsibilities? How do you think about,
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more complicated, than it kind of like maybe looks from the outside. I mean, it's not just Lasse and me anymore, right? We have like 25 people now across like multiple dimensions at 1KX, right? There's like the whole operations angle of it. You need to kind of like comply with a lot of regulations. I'm constantly like just signing things all the time. There's a lot of like paperwork involved. You need to kind of like be able to read through like 80 pages of PPMs and stuff like that. It's very boring work. But yeah, we also have, like a whole platform team, like that is working very closely with the projects, right, that we're backing, from like the token.
Sponsoring an event in Berlin useful and is being used.
Yeah, glad it's helpful.
And I think that is it takes a certain scale of fund to be able to invest in those level of resources, especially at the talent level that you have. I think that's a real differentiator. A smaller fund that is just can't source, compensate, and then retain that talent.
I mean, nuanced actually. Like what I'm seeing, a lot of funds, they're really punching above their weight. They really want to make it to the top, and therefore they are putting in a lot more work. Whereas like a lot of like the very, very large funds, I think they're getting like a little bit lazy, and for them, they have such a big brand, they don't need to, like put in that much work, they will be able to get in your deal in any case. And so I think, like working with a lot of like, smaller funds can also be like very helpful. Because again, we really like to help work also like when we are doing round constructions for some of the projects where we're investing in, we like to complement those with some smaller funds as well.
And so do you co-invest with a number of smaller funds? Are there a couple ones you particularly co-invest with?
Yeah, exactly. So we co-invest with a couple of smaller ones. I don't want to say any names now, but if you ever like gonna receive a check from us, then I'm gonna like tell you those. But it's also like the same way that we started out, right? When we invested as a beginner, like we didn't lead any rounds, right? We invested consistently, like putting in more effort than every other investor on their cap table. Eventually, like these things spread to other founders, to LPs, etc., and that's how we were able to grow from there.